with Steve Lopez, LA Times columnist. He's got a book about retirement out, and I thought this is a topic everybody would want to jump all over. So we're going to dive right in. Thanks, Steve, for being with us.
Hey, it's good to be with you. Thanks for having me.
I'm very happy to. As Larry King used to say, I haven't read your book yet. I don't know if Larry King ever got around to reading the book afterward. I think I might in this case, but I saw some interviews you did. I knew a little bit about you, but why don't I just let you kind of give your background and what led you to write this book?
Well, I've been a journalist for almost 50 years. I left college one night in 1975 with all of my belongings packed into my Ford Falcon, a sturdy and dependable vehicle, by the way. So I drove 3 hours to my first job. I was so eager to start as a journalist with my journalism degree that I got to the office really early. In fact, it was too early. The doors were locked. They weren't open yet. So I've been working ever since. 50 years. I've worked for, among other publications, the Oakland Tribune, the San Jose Mercury News, the Philadelphia Inquirer, Time Magazine. I wrote a column there for a while. Been at the LA Times for over 20 years, and I'm rapidly approaching the age of 70, and I and a lot of my peers have been talking about retirement. And if you're in a situation where those buyout offers come around, isn't it maybe you should just grab that, because who knows, it might be the last offer. So I found that I was thinking a lot about when is the right time to go, and that a lot of my colleagues in and out of journalism were thinking about the same thing and dealing with the same conflicts. For me, the conflict was, I love my job. I feel lucky and privileged to be able to do it. On the other hand, it's all I've done for 50 years. And do I want to get to some other stuff, whether it's learning how to fly an airplane or learning how to play the piano? Shouldn't I do it now before health concerns make it difficult for me? I'm ready for that big trek, but I'm hobbled, or I don't remember my wife's name. So I wanted to write a book about not the financial aspects of retirement, but the spiritual. How do you know when it's time, and who are you in retirement, especially if the job that you do has a big part of your identity wrapped up in it? How do you reinvent yourself? So I spent a year. I took a year to think about it, to interview people who are happily retired, miserably retired, wish they could, wish they hadn't. And I went to school on those experiences and wrote a book about the decision that I finally made.
Yeah. Oh, so you did make the decision yourself in the end.
I did make a decision. Yeah, I gave myself a 1 year. It was kind of a tick-tock.
Okay.
There's this time element in the book. It's like, okay, I'm zigzagging a little bit during the course of the year of research. At various times, I was sure I was going to retire, sure I was not going to retire. I'm one of those people who's kind of largely influenced by the last person I spoke to. And so that was part of my problem. But in the end, I came up with a decision that I feel pretty comfortable with.
Okay. Now, I feel like, and you tell me if you find, and I know to some people who are famous and some who weren't, but in American society, especially people of a certain, socioeconomic class, I guess, retirement is sort of put out there as the big prize at the end. Like you're putting up with a lot of stuff for this thing at the end. And then I think there's another, maybe a younger generation that looks at that and says that's completely upside down. But I'm curious, the people you talk to and yourself, was retirement a goal? Was it in the back of their mind all the time, or was it eventually realizing this is how it goes and it's kind of the natural order of things, and I got to go with it? If that makes sense.
There's a little bit of every experience in the book. I will say that we are well past the days now of work for one company for 35 years, get a fountain pen or a wristwatch, and I don't know, maybe a couple of beers at Applebee's or somewhere, and goodbye and good luck. That appears to be over, particularly in this pandemic era, in which the rules of work and retirement appear to be changing quite a bit. And what I mean by that is that with work shortages, a lot of employers have discovered that maybe they need some of those retirees back they can tap that experience, that knowledge, that wisdom. And anybody who's considering maybe going back because maybe their nest egg shrunk a bit with a market dip, you can now go back to work without getting into the car and dealing with a horrible commute. So I think flex time, I think part-time, I think that, being a mentor, being an advisor, those are things that are all available now to people who are in retirement or semi-retirement. And it seems to me that the whole field is changing. And in fact, that's part of what influenced what I ended up doing here. I have a bit of a hybrid plan that was recommended to me by many of the people I interviewed.
So let's talk about some of the people you interviewed. I think I saw you. Did you have Norman Mailer? You had some big names, and then you had some people that maybe we don't know, but they were interesting. One of my mentors used to say, the best question to ask is, what was the most interesting thing you learned, or who were the most interesting people you talked to?
Well, I talked to former teachers, professors, former healthcare administrators, a barber, a guy who had served on a parole board. So I wanted to get a lot of people from normal walks of life, some of whom are still working, and people who couldn't wait to check out. I did also, because they're both still working in their 90s, interview Mel Brooks and Norman Lear. So Norman Lear is, All in the Family.
I think I meant
All in the Family and a million other hits, and Mel Brooks, the producers, and also a million other hits throughout his legendary career. They're both in their 90s. They're still working, and what I wanted to talk to them about was, if you're in a creative field, a field where you invent something, you tell stories, you do television shows, you write, whatever. Do you really have an option, or are you kind of cursed? Is the creative energy oxygen, and if you stop doing it, do you suffocate? And so I wanted to talk to Mel Brooks about that, and also to Norman Lear. And Norman Lear was in some ways quite the philosopher, and advised that I maybe didn't even really need to think about what I'm going to do next week or next month or next year. He's very much a proponent of the idea of living in the moment, and he said, what you did yesterday is over, and your life is now about what's next. And if you wake up and there's something that drags you out of bed because you got to get to it, that's all you can ask for, and that's all you can hope for. So just do it and go with it, and feel lucky that you've got that motivation. Mel Brooks was more. I think that was good advice from Norman Lear, but hey, I'm trying to figure out whether to tell my boss I'm leaving or not. So it's a little more complicated than it might be for Norman Lear. Mel Brooks said, so let me get this straight. You love what you do, but you think you want to do other things. And I said, yes. And he said, then go to your boss right now and say, I want to keep doing this, but I want to be a part-timer. I want to back off just a little bit. Yeah. And he said, the hybrid plan might work for you because you get to do the thing that gets you out of bed, but you also get to do the things you never did. So those two guys had great advice. So did a rabbi in Los Angeles by the name of Naomi Levy, who wrote Einstein and the Rabbi, said that, look, before you idealize those things you're going to do in retirement, try to carve out some time in your working life to sample them, to sample the dream, because you may hang it up and go out there and think, I'm going to be a mentor to something. I'm going to serve on the board of this nonprofit. I'm going to learn to fly that airplane, and then find that you're afraid of flying, or it's not nearly as fulfilling to do any of these things as your job might have been. So try to sample them before you take the plunge. So that was pretty good advice.
Yeah, I think that is. Did you wind up so if anybody saw me looking down, I was quickly Googling, is Mel Brooks still alive? Because I'm trying to, and of course I messed up. I said Norman Mailer, you talked to Norman Lear, but I'm wondering, did you take that advice? Did you go to your boss at the LA Times and say, I want to keep doing this, but I want to be a part-time arranger? Is that what you wound up with?
Let me tell you something. Mel Brooks, if he gets tired of what he's doing, should be a life coach, because I took his advice.
You did, eh? Okay.
I did go to the LA Times and I said, what do you guys think? How about if I, work half time or 2/3 or 3/4? And they were open to that. And it's maybe partly because they knew I was getting to the age where I might want to transition into something else. Also because the newspaper industry is not exactly thriving these days, and staffs are being reduced and newspapers are being shut down. So it was for them, a bit of a cost savings. It was for me an opportunity to get out of class and go to recess a little bit more. So I've been doing what the rabbi suggested that I do. I've played the guitar virtually every day for the last year. And I have extra time now to play the guitar because I'm technically a part-timer at the LA Times. So I'm doing that. I've traveled a lot more, and I'm exploring new things to do with my newfound leisure time.
Yeah. Now, I assume that, and maybe I shouldn't assume, obviously you're talking about Mel Brooks, Norman Lear, and I assume your own situation. These are people who did plan enough, or at least have the financial wherewithal to be able to say, okay, I'm not going to do this anymore, and not be living on hot dogs and and rice for the rest of their life, right? So, but it doesn't really go into retirement planning and things like that, right? You're sort of assuming we're at this point one way or the other.
Well, I did talk to people who, for financial reasons, are not quite ready, and millions of Americans are not ready financially. And there are some who thought that they were, and you find out in retirement that maybe you didn't have it planned out as well as you might have.
Yeah.
In particular, there was one gentleman, and there's one gentleman in the book who was in his 70s, who was working at a checkout stand at a big box store near Disneyland. So how did he end up there? Well, he retired many years ago from a job at a utility company, kind of a middle management job. And he had what he thought was a substantial enough nest egg. And then there was a market crash. He lost most of what he had. And there he was late in life trying to find a job, and it was difficult for him. So I think one of the determinants of happiness in retirement is certainly, are you able to pay the bills? And that's one of the things I wrestled with in the book is, how do you know? I mean, you don't know when you get that Social Security statement, whether, and you've got to decide, okay, do I start taking it now or wait until I max out at age 70? Yeah. Well, how do you know? Because here's the thing. I'm at an age where, there are obituaries in the newspaper about people my age, and you don't know if you're going to live for 10 more minutes or 10 or 20 or 30 more years. So it's kind of difficult to calculate the financial part. And partly because of that reason, I focused more on the spiritual side, assuming that you can afford to put, eggs and potatoes on the table and whatever else you might want to eat today. How are you going to be fulfilled? How you create a new identity if, work was part of who you are? So the book focuses much more on that aspect of retirement.
I'm gonna share a story if I can. I think it's colored my view of notion of retirement. And it goes like this. I was a lawyer, and then I became a journalist myself, and I wrote a few books, and things were going well. The red book over my shoulder there it came out in 2010. But basically, I turned that in, and I was waiting for it to get published right when the financial crisis hit back in 2008, 2009. And as a result, I'm like, this freelancing, this is kind of difficult right now. I have a law degree. I was living in DC, and I applied for and got a job at the headquarters of the Veterans Administration, or Departments of Veterans Affairs, they call it now. I've written about this. This kind of became my 15 minutes of fame because I wound up quitting after one day and then writing about it years later. But the big moment for me, and this is why I say it colors the retirement conversation, was that we had orientation, all the new people across the department that were hired in the last week, we had to go in. And the very first guy got up and said, I'm John Smith, and I'm going to talk to you about information security. I've been working here at the VA for 26 years, so I have 3 years, 2 months, and 8 days to go. And then every other speaker, it became a running joke. Hi, I'm Jane. I'm here to talk about, retirement planning. I'm going to retire in 10 years. Somebody, and it just hit me that, man, like putting in all this time and thinking of, as you say, you don't know how much time you're going to get when you get to a certain age. I mean, in truth, you don't know how much time you're going to get at any age. But I think it colored it for me in a way that, I mean, like I say, I lasted there one day, and it wasn't the easiest thing to walk away from a sure paycheck. But I wonder if I wonder if it's a generational thing or if it's an economic thing where the whole concept is like people are. I think it's that people are grappling with the questions you raise in your book for a long time, not just towards the end anymore. I don't know if you found that.
I think for sure there are generational differences in attitudes about retirement. I work with a lot of young people. The LA Times has hired a lot of people in the last 2, 5, 10 years, and
Yeah.
they're all young enough to be. This is literally the case. They are young enough to be my grandchildren. And when I got into the newspaper business, I was thinking, this is great. I'm going to do this forever. They don't necessarily think that way. And you wonder why somebody would get into a business that is in such decline, such as newspaper journalism. And it's because they don't think in terms of, long range employment. And I think that's that's a good thing, because you keep your mind open to many different possibilities. And what's wrong with detouring in your 20s or in your 30s, or going back to college and pursuing something you hadn't even thought of? I think that can make for, a more interesting life than to do the same thing every day for, 30, 40 years. And I think also, Bill, if you're somebody who gets up and says, I have, 7 years, 4 months, 3 weeks, and 2 hours left, you probably should look for a different job. Because if you're thinking in terms of, the moment you're going to be able to escape, it sounds like you're in prison. I've been lucky. I've been lucky to be able to not only love what I do, but to have variety built into it. When this interview ends, I'm out searching for a story in the city of Los Angeles, which has about 10 million untold stories.
Yep.
And so for me, that keeps me alive. That drags me out of bed. And I'm lucky to have that. But there are a lot of people who understandably can't wait to get out of the job that they're in. And that's not necessarily such a bad thing. We see people making all sorts of moves these days. And I've worked with youngsters at the LA Times who are there a couple of years. And then you hear something like, well, they're done. They're going to law school, or they're going to work for another newspaper, or they went into PR. I think that the days of, you work for General Motors on the assembly line for 35 years, those days are probably over for a lot of people.
In a way, this is one of the more ironic interviews I've done, certainly on this topic, because to talk to somebody who, about a topic like retirement, and to talk to somebody who's a journalist and author who's on the verge of retirement, and believe me, I know writing a book is a difficult thing, even if you're passionate about the topic and you get an outline and everything. At least it is for me. I don't know for you, but it is sort of funny that I'll take on a giant project to explore the question I'm talking about, and the question I'm specifically talking about is not taking on any more giant projects.
Well, you know what, Bill? That's good that you bring that up, and thank you for bringing it up, because I did not take time off to write the book. So here I am contemplating retirement, and what I did was take on 2 jobs.
Yep.
At once. My day job, which was writing for writing columns, and then the book job. But I'll tell you what. Here's this will give you maybe some insights into me, and people can filter this through their own work experience. When I'm working and when I'm writing, I don't feel like I'm working or I'm writing. I feel like I just feel like I'm free. I don't feel like I'm counting the moments until the day when I punch out. If I'm not doing those things, I'm jittery, I'm tense, I'm nervous. My wife tells me to please go and find something to do and get out of the way. When I'm working, though, the time moves so fast. It's the nothing drags. It's just a joy for me, and that's one reason I thought so long and hard about walking away, and it's the reason that in the end I couldn't tear myself away from it. I discovered in writing this book about retirement that I was actually writing a book about work and what work is and how it identifies us. And what I discovered was that it will probably always be a part of my life. And that was one thing that Norman Lear said to me. He said, "Well, what would you do if you quit?" And I said, I'd go and live in Barcelona for maybe 6 months or maybe forever. And I would learn how to cook and I would learn how to play the guitar and I would learn language. And he said, "How long, as a writer, as a curious guy, do you think you would be living in Barcelona before you thought to yourself, I need to call my friend at such and such a newspaper and pitch a travel story, or I need to write a book about this experience?" He said, "You're always going to be with it." And Mel Brooks said the same thing. He said, "Look, all you need in the work you do is a pencil and a piece of paper, and you're always going to have that. So you're going to keep working. Just maybe carve out the time to do those other things and sample that part of the life, the life you've always imagined, experimenting with."
Yeah, it's so interesting because I came into this, I read other interviews they did, I took a quick look at the book, and I thought of this as this is a book and an interview and a topic for people, let's say, I don't know, at least 40s, 50s, at least like retirement's on the horizon. You see this. But man, I feel like almost everything we've talked about in this so far is things that people probably would benefit from hearing early in their careers. As you talk about, people not necessarily, not just not necessarily, but almost never now going to one organization and thinking I'll stay here for my whole life, you know. But I hear there's a big debate, what should you follow your passion in the beginning of a career? And I think maybe that's a completely different question from whether you should have a career that is built entirely around that one passion. I don't know if I'm making sense here, but
Well, I think Bill, that I think that your work is certainly more fulfilling if it's related to a passion or a service that you want to do. I will say, in terms of who might the book appeal to, and you're talking about younger folks, not just younger folks who maybe should think about these things earlier than they might have had in mind, but younger folks who might be helping parents or older people through this transition, but then also people who have retired and now, in some cases, either for financial reasons or soul reasons, are thinking about going back, especially since there's some opportunities given work shortages. I have a woman in the book who could not wait for retirement. She was one of those, okay, 7 days, 5 hours, 3 minutes, and she quit on a Friday and they gave her a party. And on Saturday morning, she woke up and thrilled to be retired. I'm on to the next phase of my life, and had a lovely weekend. And on Monday, woke up, and Monday was a day of structure. And she had the structure wired into her DNA. And she kind of wandered around wondering what to do. And by Friday, called her boss and said, I think I made a big mistake. She went back to work. So I think that there are retirees who might want to consider going back to work. But whether you're working or whether you're retiring, one of the people in the book is a woman in her 90s who lives in Sarasota, Florida. Her name is Nancy Schlossberg, and she was something of a muse for me. She's written a couple of books about the transition from work to retirement. And she has different categories of retirees, the couch potatoes, the adventurers, the continuers, who, like in my case, maybe you no longer go to work for the LA Times, but you become a mentor to young writers, or you teach at a local university. But what Nancy advised, and I think this is great advice, is that we all want to matter. And we need to matter in retirement just as we did when we worked, and mattered to our colleagues and mattered to our boss and maybe to our clients. We want to matter, and it could be that you matter to your cat or your dog. It could be that you matter to the nonprofit where you do some volunteering, or to your grandchild who you sometimes take care of. But you need to construct a plan for yourself in retirement, that makes you feel relevant, that makes you feel as though you matter in the world. And people who find that purpose are happy retirees, and people who don't find it are miserable retirees. And the other really good advice she gave was that in retirement, as in life, expect change, embrace ambiguity. It's not going to be a picnic. You're going to suffer loss. You're going to suffer, you're going to get hit with bills. The roof just blew off in the last hurricane.
Yep.
It's going to be difficult, and you need to embrace ambiguity, and be open to whatever comes at you next. I thought that I got a lot out of talking to Nancy, and I went back to her more than once. But that idea, I think the one that really resonates for me is, in retirement, if that's the direction you go in.
Yeah.
Find a way to matter. Do something that makes you relevant. I got that too from a priest in Los Angeles. There's, I didn't think I could write a book on this without visiting a rabbi, a priest, and a bartender. And I got good advice from all of them.
That's good. That's good. I want to ask you a little family questions. A couple. I believe I saw you talking about a discussion with your wife. So I assume you're married. I don't know if you have kids, grandkids. So I was curious about that dynamic.
Well, good.
Go ahead.
Well, Bill, it's a good thing that you brought that up because, Nancy talking about how everything changes in retirement, your relationship with your colleagues who are now your ex-colleagues, your relationship to the world, especially if you're in business like I'm in, where you're in a 50-year-long conversation about current events and a running conversation with your readers. But what she said was your relationship with your wife, your spouse will change. And I found that to be true because when the pandemic hit, my office was closed. It was shuttered like so many other offices, and I was working from the road and working from home. And what this meant was a lot more time in the day spent with my wife. And Allison is a freelance writer who works from home. So suddenly we're working in the same office, essentially. And we do not live in a 12-room Malibu Beach compound. We live in a 2-bedroom house, and there's a lot of bumping into each other. And that took some adjusting. And for me, it was kind of nice to be home a little bit more and get to see my wife a little bit more. And I said to her one day, hey, Allison, this pandemic is a little bit like a preview of retirement for me. And she said, if this is a preview, I don't want to see the movie. And she said, look, when you're retired, you better find some friends, and you better not expect me to be your everything buddy. I'm not just going to be sitting around here waiting to do whatever you want to do, whether it's go for a hike or, hit the road for the weekend. She said, I'm younger than you and I'm still working. And so I think that that's pretty typical of having to manage how relationships change when you do retire. And so I'm still working on that.
You're reminding me of just a quick funny story. I went to a writers conference, a lot of pretty successful writers, and one was talking about how he became a novelist in addition to his daytime job, A, because he really wanted to write, but B, because he kind of saw a path where if he were successful, in a few years we could retire, we could move to the beach house. And he said, my number one bit of advice is actually talk to your wife and see how she feels about retiring and moving to a beach house before you put years and effort into this.
Very good advice. Yeah, especially writing novels. That could be a tough racket.
Sure. So the book comes out, I believe, November 1st. What's it called again?
It's called Independence Day, What I Learned About Retirement from Some Who've Done It and Some Who Never Will.
Excellent. All right. Well, Steve, thank you very much. I had a great time talking with you. And everybody check out the book, and good luck with you, whatever the future holds.
Bill, thanks for having me. You did a good job here. Don't quit.
Not anytime soon. All right. Thank you.